Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes before I get started and wait for a couple of people to tune in. And then I'll get right into it. Hopefully, people will be able to join because I want to have a live discussion with the audience. I really want to talk to those Black Trump supporters right now. I really want to try to understand why you all support this man. Right after the election, I talked about how I was going to ride those Black Trump supporters until the wheels fall off. And that's what I intend to do. But why I hold them accountable, my primary focus will be Donald Trump. These Trump supporters are really just road bumps along the way. They are really not the primary focus. They're really just the puppets. So I'm going to focus on going after the puppet master instead of focusing on the puppets. Shout out to John, the professional. Thanks for tuning in. So I want to hear from y'all. You all hear from me a lot. There's been some new news about Donald Trump, trying to eliminate the Department of Education. There are reports of the Department of Justice. I mean, not the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense actually scrubbing their website of references to Black people, getting rid of articles about Jackie Robinson, getting rid of articles about Medgar Evers, getting rid of articles referencing the Tuskegee Airmen. And I just wonder, how can any Black person in their right mind support a man that wants to write Black people out of history? How do you as a Black person find yourself supporting this man? And I'm really curious. I really want to have a dialogue with these people that support Donald Trump. I really want to have a dialogue with all of those pro-Black buffoons, pseudo pro-Black buffoons that told you and me to hold our vote and to not participate in the election. And now we are seeing the living consequences of the election. And I just wonder, how can they justify what they did, by encouraging Black people not to vote? How can you justify that? I want to hear from these people, these hoteps that told you and me not to vote, those hoteps that said the two parties are one and the same. I want to hear from them. I want to hear from these Black Trump supporters. I want to know, why do you support a man like Donald Trump? So this is your opportunity to talk with me. So while we wait for these people, I will be surprised if they actually come to the comments now and try to have an actual debate or discussion about this. But while we wait, I just want to go through some of the things that Donald Trump has done. One of the first things that Donald Trump did when he got elected was issue executive orders ending diversity, equity, and inclusion. And make no mistake about it, Donald Trump and people that think like him view DEI as like the new N word. Another new N word that they use is woke. That is another racially coded word for Black people. And so when they talk about DEI, they automatically assume that any Black person in a position of authority, any Black person that is successful, any Black person in government, any Black pilot, any Black doctor, any Black lawyer, they automatically assume that that black person is not qualified. They automatically assume that that person was appointed simply because of their race. They have completely distorted what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about. They have made it seem as if it's just a, a program designed to appoint any black person to any position simply because they're black, or any minority or any woman or any other disadvantaged group to a position simply because of their identity. And that's not the case. Diversity, equity, and inclusion was about providing opportunities for those black people that were already qualified, those so-called people of color that were already qualified, that were looked over because of implicit bias, because of the old boys network, because of historic racism and stuff. So they've got, Donald Trump has issued these executive orders ending diversity, equity, and inclusion. His Department of Education issued a letter called the Dear Colleague letter, where they basically threatened schools that had any kind of DEI programs, that they would take away funding from those schools. They basically threatened, like if a school, for instance, emphasizes Black history or any other kind of ethnic studies, they are threatening to take away funds from those schools. Any schools that have like affinity groups that are thriving on campus, they are threatening to take away those funds, federal funds, from those schools. Any schools that have, for instance, Black safe spaces, like Black dorms where, Black students like to hang out, or Black centers and stuff like that, or Black graduation ceremonies, they are threatened to withhold federal funds from those institutions. And it's just sad. Like, I see what you're saying, John, the professional. You talked about how this anti-DEI push is being endorsed by prominent Black conservative, and I'm not surprised by that. Those people are like bottom feeders. They are hustlers, and they will do anything for $1. They will sell out their people for $1. And the sad thing is, while they are condemning DEI, they don't realize that those white conservatives still view them as DEI people as well. They don't even have respect for them. So you had all these buck dancing, shucking and jiving Negroes that did all this tap dancing for Trump. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump did not even bother to appoint them, because in his mind, they are DEI hires, even though they are these Black conservatives. These people are, they are the modern day house Negroes that Malcolm X talked about. They are the Sambos of today. They are the complete sellouts of today. These are the same people that snitched on Nat Turner and Gabriel Prosser and Denmark Vesey. These are the kind of Negroes that we're talking about when you talk about these so-called conservative Negroes. They are against policies that benefit them. Candace Owens is a complete clown because, years ago, she complained about how she was discriminated against and subjected to racism and all that kind of stuff. And she went to the NAACP in her community for assistance. But now she wants to pretend that racism is not an issue, racism is not a problem, and all that kind of stuff. She's a complete joke. Just like all those buffoons that went to the White House, those Black buffoons, those Black sellouts, those Black Aunt Jemimas, those white supremacists in blackface, all of those clowns that went to the White House to celebrate Black History Month. Celebrating Black History Month with a president that wants to blot out Black history. That's literally what he wants to do. Shout out to Lasheed for you. It's been a minute. I haven't been on here in a while. I hope you're doing well. I got to check you out. But yeah, I mean, with all this stuff going on, you got these buck dancing, sellout Negroes supporting Donald Trump. This man is trying to erase Black history. You know, they are literally, as I mentioned earlier, taking away Black history from the Department of Defense website. You know, getting rid of articles about Jackie Robinson, getting rid of articles about Medgar Evers, you know, erasing the fact that there are many Black heroes at Arlington Cemetery. They're just erasing that history, erasing the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. And then now what they have basically done is they have painted white people as the victims. White people are now the victims of racism as far as they're concerned. They're more concerned about white tears and white fears and white frustration than they are concerned about, you know, making sure that the American people are taught actual facts when it comes to American history. They want to give you a fairy tale version of history. They want to give you a glossed over, whitewashed version of history. And for schools that don't want to go along with Donald Trump's program, they're threatening to take away federal funds. So now schools are forced to stop teaching about Black history. They're forced to get rid of, you know, Black History Month. They're forced to get rid of Black organizations on campus. So that's one thing that Donald Trump has done, these anti-DEI measures. The other thing that Donald Trump has done is, you know, he recently, you know, just today they announced that he wants to eliminate the Department of Education, a department that greatly benefits the Black community. You know, many of our schools, you know, where they're in low income neighborhoods, they rely on federal funds. You know, many of the schools that have free lunch programs, they rely on federal funds. And we know that many of those schools that had a free lunch programs that are in low income neighborhoods, they are disproportionately Black. And with the elimination of the Department of Education, what does that mean for low income students that depend on free lunch and free breakfast at school for meals? What does it mean for those low income schools that rely on federal dollars? We already know about the massive educational disparities that exist between Black and white communities. It is only going to be exacerbated, you know, with the elimination of the Department of Education. We know that many Black students rely on Pell Grants in order to go to college. I wouldn't have been able to go to college without a Pell Grant. And we know that the Department of Education is responsible for issuing Pell Grants to make it possible for low-income students to go to college. Without Pell Grants, many of us would not be able to go to college. I would not be an attorney today if it wasn't for Pell Grants. You know, those free lunches. You know, I grew up in a low-income household again, and I relied on free lunches and free breakfasts at the schools that I attended. And it's a shame that, you know, many people will be without those because of this effort to eliminate the Department of Education. And while they're cutting back on these vital things like education, you know, they are trying to finance these tax cuts for the ultra rich like Elon Musk and Donald Trump and his whole crew and all them. While they're cutting away U.S. aid to poor countries, you know, that rely on U.S. aid to combat disease, to feed the hungry and all that kind of stuff. All those programs are going to be cut while these rich fat cats get richer and richer and fatter at the expense of not only the American people, but people around the world. So I have to ask, like, why do any Black people support Donald Trump? You know, I just don't get it. I don't understand at all why any Black person would support Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, I'm going to hold on one second. I'll be right back. I have to plug in my laptop. I'll be back in one second. Just bear with me. Okay. I'm probably going to have to restart this, continue with a second live stream, but I'm going to go as long as I can. I have to locate my power cord. But yeah, it's just crazy, man, what Donald Trump is doing. I can't understand how any black person can support him. He's getting rid of the Department of Education. And I already talked about the impact that that will have on black people. Um, and then one of the most disturbing things that Donald Trump did is he issued an executive order that will basically no longer require federal contractors to say that they will not segregate employees. And I'm going to pull up the language. There's an actual letter that was put out, and I'm not going to share it. I'm just going to, hopefully you all can still see me. I'm not going to share the actual letter on my screen, but in this letter, it says, when issuing new solicitations or contracts, do not include any of the following provisions and clauses. And one of those clauses is prohibition of segregated facilities. So now they don't have to include a clause saying that, that it's prohibited for these federal contractors to have segregated facilities. What kind of message is Donald Trump sending? What is he saying? And then Donald Trump also issued an executive order condemning South Africa because of the efforts that they're making to bring about equity in South Africa. We know that all these years after apartheid, South Africa continues to have disparities when it comes to land ownership. Despite the fact that white people are a tiny minority in that country, they still own and control most of the wealth in South Africa. So I found my cord, so we should be good. I'm just going to plug this up real quick. Just bear with me a second. So Donald Trump issued an executive order encouraging white South Africans to come to America, to migrate to the United States. And he condemned the South African government because of measures they're taking to bring about more equity in South Africa. As I pointed out, all these years after apartheid, Black people are still economically disadvantaged. White people still own most of the land. White people are still far more wealthy than the Black indigenous people in South Africa. And because they're trying to bring about some equity, Donald Trump is imposing sanctions on South Africa. And while Donald Trump is encouraging these white South Africans to come to America, he's undermining and preventing people of color from coming to this country. He's revoked protective status for Black Haitian refugees. He's, deporting Black Jamaicans. He's getting rid of, Latinos from this country. He is literally trying to make America white again. And this is a man who said out his own mouth that, that we don't need Africans here. He referred to African countries as shithole countries. And while he referred to African countries as shithole countries, he talked about how America needs to have more immigrants from places like Norway, a predominantly white country. But yet and still, you got these buck dancing buffoons running around here with these MAGA hats on, supporting this man, just like a loyal good slave, just like a loyal dog. That's how these buffoons look running around supporting Donald Trump. And you got these fake pro-Black folks that were basically low-key supporting Donald Trump, and they should be ashamed of themselves. They have been exposed as the frauds that they are. They have been exposed as useless individuals. They have been exposed as frauds, man, while they pretend to be black leaders, discouraging black people from voting, and then some of them outright encouraging people to support Donald Trump. And it's sad and sick. You got these so-called conscious folks supporting Donald Trump. Like I was, during the election, I was very troubled and disturbed when I saw that Lord Jamar had supported Donald Trump. He was saying all this, praising Donald Trump while referring to a black woman as a B word. While he was referring to this black woman like that, he was heaping all kinds of praise on this white, rich man that doesn't give a damn about black people. And this is supposed to be some 5%er, somebody that believes that the black man is quote unquote God, somebody that believes that the white man is devil. But yet he had all this praise for this so-called white devil while condemning this black sister. All these people had all this stuff to say about whether or not Kamala Harris was black and this and that. And here's the end result. We have a white supremacist in the White House trying to white out black history, trying to close doors of opportunity for black people, doing everything in his power to undermine the black community. And on the flip side of that, you got these buck dancing people that the brother mentioned in the comments section, supporting Donald Trump, defending the end of DEI. And you got some people that said, well, DEI didn't benefit black people and all that kind of stuff. It benefited all these other groups and didn't benefit black people. The fact of the matter is black people did, in fact, benefit from DEI programs. And this is bigger than DEI. It's bigger than that. That's just a convenient label. They are basically trying to close the door of opportunity to black people, period. And they don't want black history being taught in schools, period. Donald Trump, while he is, he has diverted the FBI from focusing on these white terrorist groups. This is another thing that he's done. Diverted the FBI from focusing on these white terrorist groups, while at the same time, instead of dealing with the problem of white supremacy, he wants to focus the FBI, weaponize the FBI against black people that are trying to fight against white supremacy. Instead of addressing the problem of police brutality, Donald Trump wants to criminalize black people that speak out against police brutality. He wants to use the FBI to investigate black groups like Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter, again, that's just a label that they are using. It's not limited to the quote unquote Black Lives Matter organization. They are using that as a label to go after black activists, period. What we're witnessing is a new counterintelligence program being implemented under Donald Trump. That's what we're witnessing. That's what we're seeing right now. Donald Trump has criminalized protests on student campuses. He's warned colleges that allow protests to occur that he is going to take away their federal funding and use the Justice Department to go after those schools. To use the Justice Department to go after schools that are trying to promote diversity, that are trying to make sure that more African Americans are able to attend their colleges and universities. Donald Trump issued, like threats to like 50 colleges and universities for not complying with his anti-DEI agenda. And all that amounts to is less opportunity for black people to go to college, less opportunity for black people to excel in the professional arena. That's what Donald Trump is doing. Criminalizing protests. He's criminalizing protests whether it's protests against the side that's going on in Gaza or it's protests against the police brutality that's happening here. He's criminalizing those things, while at the same time, he wants to give the police immunity to attack, brutalize, and harass and kill Black people. That's what Donald Trump wants to do. But you still got these old buck dancing, boot licking, butt kissing Uncle Ruckuses that support this man. Whether they are these quote unquote conservatives or conservatives, as I like to call them, or these hoteps. You got both of these groups of people supporting this man. And to me, that means you have no credibility. Any Black person that got on here and supported Donald Trump, they should not be listened to. They need to be excommunicated from the Black community. But these are some of the things that Donald Trump is doing. This is just a few of the things. And I've talked about other things that he's done, like with these executive orders in prior videos, but this is outrageous. This man is defying federal court orders. And I'm going to get to your comments in a second. Donald Trump is defying federal court orders. This man, he tried to he deport all these people saying that they're gang members and all that kind of stuff. And the courts ordered him to stop what he was doing, but he continued. And that's very frightening that you got a president that is disobeying federal orders. There are no checks and balances when you have a president that is not going to comply with the judiciary. There are no checks and balances at that point. And we know that the only way to enforce a federal, the federal court decision is through the Justice Department, and Donald Trump controls that. And ultimately, what should happen is this man needs to be impeached. But we know that Congress doesn't have a will right now to do that. And that's scary, man. It is scary that we got a punkified, sissified Congress that doesn't have the balls to do what is necessary to end this madness. This man has defied the Constitution, defiled the Constitution. Time and all these judges have found that his actions are unconstitutional. Judge after judge around the country has found his executive orders to be unconstitutional. But yet and still, he continues on defying these judges and continuing on to defy the Constitution. And for that, he should be impeached, man. He should also be impeached for basically being an agent of Russia. He's destroyed the United States ties to his allies, Canada, Mexico, and NATO, while at the same time he's heaped all kinds of praise on Putin. So I think that that's a clear sign that this man is, in fact, probably a Russian asset. This man is destroying the economy with these ridiculous tariffs that don't serve any purpose. His tariffs are not against enemies. I know that he had, other than China, his tariffs are against U.S. allies like Canada and Mexico, which is absolutely crazy. This man ran on, ending inflation. This man ran on reducing prices for groceries. But now we're going to see that those prices skyrocket. The same federal, they have Elon Musk. He fired thousands of federal workers. And there have been judges that have issued orders demanding that some of those workers go back to work. But he's fired federal workers. And some of those federal workers were Trump supporters. And now they're singing a different tune. This is the madness that we're witnessing right now, man. Yeah, this is the madness that we see. So I'm going to look at your comments. I want to thank y'all for tuning in. Shout out to Lashid for you. Shout out to John the Professional. So I'm going to go through your comments and respond to a couple of things. But it's just so frustrating seeing what's going on with Donald Trump. Every other day, it's a new outrageous thing that this man is doing. And before I get to your comments, I want to just say that we have to do everything in our power to resist this man. And one of the biggest things that we can do is make sure that we are registered to vote so that we can vote for the midterms, to make sure that Congress is different, so that we have a Congress that will resist this man and fight against this man. So that's one of the things that we have to do. And we have to join and support organizations that are fighting against Donald Trump's agenda. There are plenty of organizations that have filed lawsuits against Donald Trump. We should support them, by joining them, by donating to them, by getting involved in protests and demonstrations that they're organizing. Later, for sitting on the sidelines complaining about stuff. Later for that. It's time for us to get active and involved. And one thing that I want to touch on is, there have been some people, and I'll get to your comments in a second, but there have been some people that have suggested that we did our part. And I agree that we did do our part in terms of Black people turning out to vote. Black women in particular, 92% of them voted for Kamala Harris. And the overwhelming majority of Black men also voted for Kamala Harris, even though there was a disappointing increase in the number of Black men that voted for the Republican candidate, Donald Trump. But Black people did our part. It's white men that overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. It's Latino men that voted for Donald Trump, and even white women, even though Donald Trump was taking away some of their rights, like the right to choose and all that kind of stuff, they still voted for him. And that says a lot in and of itself. But we did our part. And some people are saying, well, Black people did our part and we should just let the country burn, let Trump do his thing and destroy the country. And to some degree, I understand where that mentality is coming from. But as long as we live in this house called America, we should do everything in our power to prevent them from burning down our house, America. We built this house with our blood, sweat, and tears. Our ancestors built this house with all their sacrifices, with all their sacrifices, with their blood, sweat, and tears. They built this house called America. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let this house burn, because the truth of the matter is there is no mass exodus happening anytime soon. Black people in massive numbers are not returning to Africa or going somewhere else. The fact of the matter is this is our home, and we have to fight to protect this home, not only for ourselves, but for our children and grandchildren and future generations. So I'll be damned if I'm going to sit around and let it burn. All these groups that come to this country benefited from the sacrifice that we made as a people. So we need to be in this fight to protect what is ours, to protect our interests. This man is trying to roll back the clock on civil rights, trying to roll back all of that, erasing Black people from websites, the Department of Defense. And I'm not one to celebrate the military or anything like that, but they're erasing Black people's contributions in military, erasing the contributions of a hero like Medgar Evers, a martyr like Medgar Evers, even erasing somebody like a Colin Powell, a Black Republican. They're erasing him from the website. So that tells you just how despicable these people are. These mega people. And it's no coincidence that white supremacists support Donald Trump, because he's really about making America white again. That's his agenda. But let me go ahead to your comments. So John, the professional, asked, is the problem Trump, or is the problem our lost people who are asleep under this administration? I mean, I think that This people that are unconscious, and these people that celebrate and support Donald Trump, they are lost and they are a problem. But the fact of the matter is, as despicable as those people are, they are a tiny minority. Trump is actually the problem. He is the enemy, and he needs to be our focus. We need to be fighting against Donald Trump. You know, and that's one of the reasons why I strongly commend that brother, Reverend Al Green, who disrupted that ridiculous clown show that Donald Trump did before Congress when he gave that long, drawn-out speech. That brother spoke up. He talked about you don't have a mandate to cut Medicaid. Medicaid is a program that makes it possible for poor people to get medical insurance. Makes sure that they're able to get the care that they need. And this Trump administration is possibly going to put Medicare on the chopping block so that they can accommodate these tax cuts for these ultra rich oligarchs. That's what we're looking at. So I'm going to continue going through your comments. Yeah, it's just sick. Yeah, as Lashid is pointing out, she says the only supposed victims today are the supposedly white conservatives, especially the white male conservative. Everybody else is just plain victim, according to them. Exactly. That's the mentality that they have. They're so concerned about how white people are going to feel about things. Like how white people are going to feel guilty or responsible when you talk about the history of racism in this country, when you talk about segregation and you talk about slavery and all this kind of stuff. They feel like that's going to make them feel bad about being white and about what their ancestors did and all that kind of stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, they should feel bad about what their ancestors did. And they should pay reparations for all the dirt and evil that their ancestors did that they continue to benefit from. But yeah, they want to play the victim. They want to play the victim, even though Black people are the ones they continue to suffer all kinds of disparities in education and health and sentencing and wealth, massive wealth disparities. There's some study done that pointed out how it would take Black people 200 plus years to match the same level of wealth as white people in this country. But yet and still, these white men want to cry and whine and pretend like they are the victims. And I just find it funny how the people that complain about victim mentality have embraced a white victimhood mentality. It's just crazy how things have turned, man. They have, one of the roles of the Department of Education is to investigate civil rights violations in schools. And so that's another aspect that's being eliminated. But instead of using the Department of Education to investigate actual civil rights violations, they are now, in that Dear Colleague letter, they posted a telephone number for white people to call and complain about their victimhood and their oppression and all that kind of stuff. Anytime you want to deal with the inequality in this society and the racism and the discrimination in the society, somehow they view that as punishing white people. They view that as victimizing white people. And I find that to be absolutely despicable. And I can't understand for the life of me why any Black person could find themselves supporting this man, even at this late date, after all these actions that this man is taking while in this White House. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Covina, man. Hoteps and, these Black manosphere people supported Donald Trump. I just wonder, like, how long are they going to support Donald Trump? Are they going to continue to support Donald Trump when he gives these police immunity to kill black people? Are they going to still support Donald Trump when he sets up stop and frisk in black communities, even though stop and frisk has been found to be unconstitutional? Are they still going to support him then? It's just crazy, man. Like, how do you as a black man find yourself supporting a man that was sued twice by the Justice Department for housing discrimination because he didn't want to rent to black people? How do you find yourself supporting a man that's actually contemplating getting rid of all those consent decrees against those police departments because of their discriminatory policing practices? How do you find yourself as a black man supporting a man whose top official is, talked about how maybe we should reconsider, maybe the president should consider issuing a pardon for Derek Chauvin. And that's that police officer that killed our brother George Floyd. There actually is an effort afoot to get this man, a pardon, even though he killed George Floyd. He kept his knee on that brother's neck for over 8 minutes while that brother was screaming out he can't breathe and screaming for his life. That's the man that they want to pardon. That's the man that they want to see free from jail. That's the man that Elon Musk said that that's something to think about. We need to think about having Donald Trump pardon this man. This is the kind of man we're talking about here. But yet and still you got these buck dancing Black manosphere buffoons, supporting Donald Trump. And you got these fake woke hoteps supporting Donald Trump. I mean, I can't understand like how somebody that, create a whole film series teaching about Black history can low-key support Donald Trump while bashing a Black woman and questioning her Blackness and all that kind of stuff. It's crazy. Shout out to Alan Lavelle. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I do think that there's something behind that, Lashid, the whole FBA movement. I just think that that's a real narrow-minded movement that promotes anti-Black immigrant sentiment. That's what it's all about. That is a divide and conquer strategy, dividing Black people up into these categories and having Black people arguing with one another instead of fighting white supremacy. We're fighting each other. That's what FBA has produced. That's what FBA is all about. And we know that FBA is basically an offshoot of ADOS, the ADOS movement. It's a, bastardized version of the ADOS movement. It basically took that anti-immigrant sentiment and anti-Pan-Africanist sentiment to a whole nother level. And it's something that, something that was created and monetized by Tariq Nasheed. He took that term FBA and wrote that term so that he could profit off of it, selling people all kinds of products based on FBA, using that as a brand and stuff like that. Basically profiteering off of divisiveness in our community. Anything that divides us up has to be questioned, man. That looks like agent type of activity to me. It's just funny how somebody can go from talking about melanated people, talking about unity among melanated people to promoting division among those so-called melanated people. I could go on and on about that, but I don't want to make that my focus. Yeah, it's just crazy, man. Like all of these people, like I saw, I see these little clips everywhere, like because I haven't been on YouTube like I used to be. Like, I used to regularly watch all these content people. I'm on TikTok a lot. So I see a lot of videos on TikTok of people like Phil from the Advice Show and all these other people running with these Trump talking points, man. You know, and I could go on and on about that, but I'm going to chill on that. But it's really disappointing. It's disappointing to see all these people doing all this work, questioning this black woman, but they yet and still they gave Trump all kinds of passes and made all kinds of excuses for him. And I think part of it deals with the misogyny that a lot of these people have towards black women. This hatred that they have towards black women. They don't want to see a black woman in a position of power. They hate that. They resent that. So I think that that's part of the reason behind it. And I know that that's part of the reason why that Black Manosphere was against Kamala Harris. And I wouldn't be surprised why they would support a racist like Donald, a sexist racist like Donald Trump. And then Jonathan Professional pointed out this. It's amazing that Trump supported painting over BLM Plaza in D.C., but doesn't want Confederate statues taken down. I mean, that's a powerful point. Donald Trump wants to get rid of, like in D.C., there's like a whole block where it says Black Lives Matter in the middle of the street. And again, like some people will focus on Black Lives Matter as an organization, but it's bigger than that. That sign literally says Black Lives Matter, that our lives are significant. Our lives matter. Our lives shouldn't be taken for granted. And the fact that Donald Trump wants to erase that from the nation's capital, that should tell you everything you need to know about this man. He is literally saying that Black lives don't matter. That's what he's literally saying. And while he wants to wipe that out, as the brother John the Professional said, he defends Confederate statues. Just like he defended those people in Charlottesville, said there's some very fine people. Those racist white supremacists, he called them some very fine people. And they were there to defend a Confederate statue. And we know that the Confederacy was about defending the institution of slavery. It was about white supremacy. And I know that there are a lot of people that question that. They say, well, it was about, it wasn't about white supremacy. It's about heritage. That's why we want to keep these flags and all that kind of stuff. But there's a powerful book that I encourage people to read. And that's Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. I encourage you to read that. Our book club, New Possibilities Book Club, read that book last month. And in that book, it talks about the Confederacy. And there's a quote from the vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens. And he says this, he basically admitted that the Confederacy was about maintaining white supremacy. He said that our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid. Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is no equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. That's what the Confederacy was about. Preserving the quote unquote natural condition of the Negro, which is slavery as far as they're concerned. The black man was inferior in the minds of the Confederacy. So that's what Donald Trump wants to protect. He wants to protect those symbols. He wants to protect Confederate symbols while he blots out a, a, a statement that Black Lives Matter. This man threatened to withhold federal funds from the DC government if they did not get rid of that sign. That just shows you how sick and demented this man is. It shows you how despicable this man is. But yet and still, you got these buck dancing Negroes and these lost Hotep folks defending this man and supporting this man. They should be ashamed of themselves, and they should be excommunicated from the Black community for supporting the open enemy of the Black community. Yeah, I'm just, yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, they're not real conservatives, Lashid. You're right. I mean, they're just hustlers. And there's a word that I'm trying to remember that describes them perfectly. They just like shysters and stuff like that. They will say anything for $1. They will say anything for a pat on the head from Mr. Charlie. They will say anything for white love and white validation. Just like a dog is eager to get in the lap of his master or eager to get a pat on the head from their master. That's how they are, eager to get a dog biscuit from their master. And that's how they are. The dog biscuit is, views. The dog biscuit are likes from white folks. It's just sad, man. It's really sad and sick. Yep, the price of eggs is skyrocketing. But Donald Trump ran on reducing all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's just crazy. And that's one of the things, like, as Lashid is pointing out, like some of this stuff is not new and stuff like Make America Great Again. That was a part of Reagan's presidency. And then, I was watching CNN and they were just showing clips of Reagan basically calling for the end of the Department of Education as well. And they pointed out how many of these Republicans have wanted to get rid of the Department of Education a long time ago. And it's just really messed up, man. It's really messed up the direction that this country is going in. It's going backwards. I mean, how are you as a federal government going to say, well, we're no longer going to put in the contracts that you cannot segregate, in your facilities as a contractor? That sends like a very negative message to the American people. It's just crazy. Yeah, I hear you, LT. It's like you support them and then you just see like the direction that they go over time. Like, you see what the real agenda is and stuff. You see the hypocrisy and the fraudulent conduct and stuff. And I could just do a whole video just on that alone. Yeah, that's right. They did get Black people to support Trump by playing on gender. Because I was listening to Lord Jamar and he was talking about like how Kamala Harris wasn't fit to run a 7-Eleven and blah, blah, blah. And, referred to her as the B word and this and that. I'm just like, man, what is wrong with you, man? This is a highly educated Black woman. A Black woman is served as an attorney general for the state of California. A Black woman is served as a U.S. senator. A Black woman is served as vice president, but yet in your twisted mind, she's not qualified. She's not qualified. And that's one of the sick things too, man. Like while this Trump administration wants to talk about merit-based hiring and getting rid of quote unquote DEI hires, they have hired some of the most incompetent, unqualified people ever. They fired qualified Black people and replaced them with unqualified, mediocre white folks like that, like Hegseth. That guy, his qualifications pale in comparison to his predecessor, a Black man. He's just like a disgrace. This is a drunkard, a womanizer, somebody that was a low-ranking military person, ended up replacing a highly decorated Black general and stuff. It's just sick, man. And then they fired that highly decorated Black general, and replaced him with somebody of a lower rank and all that kind of stuff. So this is not about qualifications. That is not about merit-based anything. This is about maintaining a system of white supremacy, a system of white dominance. And these people fear the browning of America. They know that in like 45 years or so, America will become a majority minority country, and they hate that. And they want to maintain power just like the white people in South Africa maintain power despite being in a minority. And the way you maintain power is to get rid of opportunities for quote unquote minorities, get rid of educational opportunities, get rid of job opportunities, criminalize Black people, mass incarceration. And that just reminds me of another point with Donald Trump. Like, you had these Black folks crying about Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor. But I haven't heard a word from these people so far about Donald Trump's proposal to impose the death penalty against drug dealers. The death penalty. So this is even worse than the problem of mass incarceration. This man wants to kill drug dealers. And we know how the criminal justice system is set up. Black people are disproportionately targeted, disproportionately sentenced. We know that when it comes to the death penalty, Black people are more likely to get the death penalty than white people. So basically, this man is calling for the killing of many people in our community who, because of lack of opportunities, have resorted to selling drugs in order to survive. But I haven't heard a word from all these people that have all this stuff to say about Kamala Harris and her record as a prosecutor. What do y'all have to say about that? What do you have to say about this man calling for the death penalty against drug dealers? This is not the death penalty against, killers. This is the death penalty against people for selling drugs. It's just really crazy. Yeah, I just have to get on here and like vent, about this stuff. And, and I see, I see that Lashif, you mentioned anti-war. And that was one of the reasons why some people supported Donald Trump. They thought he was anti-war. And some of these lost people actually thought he was going to bring about peace in the Middle East and all that kind of stuff. And all I could do is just shake my head at that, man. Because this man, you had these lost Muslims in Michigan, supporting Donald Trump because they actually thought he was going to bring about peace. When this man recently said that America is going to own Gaza, and he basically endorsed ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And he's, basically giving this guy, Benjamin Netanyahu, a green light to do whatever. And we see that now that peace ceasefire deal has crumbled and Israel is back to committing genocide against the Palestinian people. At our expense, American dollars are funding that. Why we got struggling schools over here, like here, I live in Baltimore. We got struggling schools in Baltimore that need resources. Instead of sending those resources to help the struggling schools in Baltimore, instead of sending those resources to feed the hungry and house the homeless, they are sending billions upon billions of dollars to Israel for weapons. They're giving Israel weapons that are used to kill the babies. And Donald Trump, despite, presenting this anti-war image, is all for this stuff. He basically threatened that all hell would break loose if they didn't get, the quote unquote hostages back. This situation is crazy, man. And it's just crazy that people bought into the lies that Donald Trump told. He falsely promised those people that he would do something about Gaza and all this and that. And he hasn't done anything. He lied to the American people saying, I don't even know what Project 2025 is, Project 2025 is. He told people that. He kept saying that over and over again. And we see that now that he's been elected, he's been issuing all these executive orders that are straight from the playbook of 2025, of the 2025 project. It's just really sad, man. Shout out to Fredro Miller. Thanks for your support. I appreciate it. He says, thanks for all the years of good commentary. I appreciate that. Yeah, it is crazy, Elaine. Shout out to Elaine Lloyd. Yeah, it is crazy that he still has all these supporters. The people who have actually lost their jobs and Medicare are still supporting this guy. But some of them are starting to wake up, like these farmers that are losing their business because of these tariffs. All these other people being affected by this attack on immigrants and stuff like that. Because the sad truth is, many of these businesses depend on those quote unquote undocumented immigrants. And now they're going to be without those immigrants, and that's going to hurt their business. Like one of these Trump supporters was talking about how, they depend on undocumented workers and stuff like that. And now their business is going under because of what Trump has done. And then you have, you have all those federal workers that are losing their jobs. That means less revenue for cities like DC and, the surrounding counties in the DC area, like Prince George's County and Montgomery County and other parts of Maryland and Virginia. So that's less tax revenue for those cities and counties as a result of these people losing their jobs. That's less money to the businesses that benefit from those federal workers working in DC. When those federal workers go to lunch or they use the metro and stuff like that, that's revenue for those areas. And now all of that revenue is going away. And the sad thing is, you got Elon Musk, the richest man in America, joking about cutting people's jobs and stuff on stage with a saw, joking about cutting the federal government and basically cutting people out of their jobs. While this man continues to reap all these benefits through these contracts with the federal government. It's just crazy what times we live in. And earlier I had mentioned one of the books that our book club read, and that's Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. And, for those people that don't know, we do have a book club. We meet on the last Sunday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom and in person. So if you're outside of the Baltimore area, you can join us from anywhere in the world through Zoom. So I encourage you all to, just pay attention to the post that I make about the book club. Our next book is going to be All About Love by Bell Hooks, and that'll be on the 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom. So if you're out of the area, you can join us by Zoom. If you live in the Baltimore area, I encourage you to come out in person. We meet at the Baltimore County Public Library in Towson, Maryland, and that's at 320 York Road, Towson, Maryland. So I'm going to continue to go through these comments. There's so much stuff that I could say. And I'm probably going to do more of these live streams because I really like interacting with people in real time. And I plan to get back to posting my regular content on here. I need to get back to regularly posting on here. And I want to encourage you all to encourage your people to subscribe to this channel. I'm trying to reach 10,000 subscribers. Like for the longest time, I've been stuck in that 9,000 margin, and I'm just a few subscribers away. Let me just check to see how many subscribers I have, because I really just want to try to meet that goal of over 10,000. Let me just. So I have all I need is 57 subscribers to reach 10,000 subscribers. So I just need y'all to spread the word about the channel, New Possibilities. For whatever reason, sometimes I feel like YouTube is hating on me and stopping me from being great, but I'm not. But I'm not going to think. I'm going to try not to think like that and just do the work. So let me keep going. Yeah, it's just crazy, man. What's going on? Yeah. I mean, I think you're right, Rashid. In this book, in that book, Caste, that we had just finished reading, that I mentioned earlier, they talked about how, you regularly hear people say, well, these white workers are voting against their interests. These white women are voting against their interests, and all that kind of stuff. Shout out to Elaine. Thanks for that donation. He said, that's why you abandoned us for TikTok. I don't even have a TikTok. Yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, I get a lot of traction on TikTok, and I like TikTok because it's a shorter platform. So you do shorter videos or whatever. I like it for different reasons, but I like YouTube as well because, I like being able to just talk as long as I feel like, and whether people are watching or not. I like I like the live streams and stuff like that, and they have live streams over there. I like them both for different reasons. I still got love for YouTube, especially my people over here like Elaine and Rashid. I really like that. Oh, so Rashid wanted to know what's the Cash App. My Cash App is my name, and I'll just put it here in the. My Cash App is my name, Anson Asaka. And I hope people don't start. I mean, people already know my name, but hopefully they don't start doxing me and all that kind of crap. I've had a few people do that. But yeah, I was saying, I was talking about the book, Caste. So a lot of times people say, well, these white people are voting against their interests. You got these poor whites or working class white people and white women, and even these Latino men, voting against their quote unquote interests. But in that book, she pointed out how they're not voting against their interests because their interest is white supremacy, man. Like at the end of the day, despite how messed up their lives may be, in their mind, as long as they have a leg up on Black people and other people of color, they feel good about themselves. That helps boost their self-esteem. All they have to live for is their whiteness. And Trump gives them that. So even the most lowly of white men, you know, the working class white man, feels like he can identify with Trump because he makes him feel special as a white man. And, you know, and it's just sad, like even like a lot of Latinos, you know, want to gravitate towards whiteness. They want to gravitate towards whiteness and assimilate and all that kind of stuff. So they figure that the best way to identify with whiteness is to identify with a racist like Donald Trump. And, you know, I've seen all these videos of all these immigrants saying, oh, I support Donald Trump. I support Donald Trump. And then after he got elected, their whole tune changed when he talked about getting rid of birthright citizenship and all that kind of stuff, when he started deporting their friends and family and stuff. But Donald Trump told y'all what he was going to do, but they didn't believe him. And shout out to Rashid. Thanks for your donation and your support. I appreciate you. Yeah, we got to get back to doing those group live streams. Shout out to Alan Lavelle. You know, I appreciate your support. We got to get it back to doing those group live streams like we did back when they had Google Hangouts and stuff. You know, so we just need to work out something where we have a session with a lot of YouTubers talking and stuff. Yeah, man, it's crazy. But yeah, I don't want to hold y'all too long, man. I'm going to be back on here doing the live stream sometime soon. I've gotten out of the habit of announcing when I'm doing live streams because sometimes my schedule gets messed up and then I end up not being able to do it. So I'm not going to announce it, but I encourage you all to turn on those notifications so that way you'll know when I go live and you'll know when I post videos. I'm going to get back to posting regularly over here, you know, because I like YouTube, man. I need to post more on here, balance things out and stop just posting on TikTok. But if you're on TikTok, I encourage you to follow me over there as well. My TikTok is New Possibilities Blog. So I encourage you all to follow me over there. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And I hope that y'all keep up the fight, man. Don't be discouraged by Donald Trump and his nonsense. Peace.